The galaxy was supposed to be quiet. That was what Commander Elena Marsh had been told when she first accepted her posting aboard the USS Resolute, one of Earth's newest Dreadnought-class warships. A diplomatic patrol, her superior Admiral James Conroy had said. Routine. You'll escort some trade convoys, shake a few hands with the Vathyri Council, and come home in one piece. He had smiled when he said it, the way old men smile when they know they are lying but believe the lie is kind. Elena had smiled back because she was 29 years old, and she had learned early in life that smiling was the fastest way to get out of a room. She had not expected this. The bridge of the Resolute was a cathedral of glass and steel. It stretched 300 meters from bow to stern at its widest point, packed with consoles, holographic displays, and the quiet, focused sounds of 47 crew members doing their jobs. The lighting was always set to a soft amber during the night cycle, which made everything look warm. A deliberate design choice, Elena had learned, because deep space had a way of making people feel cold even when the temperature was perfect. You needed warmth. You needed the feeling of something human around you when the black outside your windows went on forever. Elena stood at the center of the bridge, both hands resting flat on the edge of the main tactical display, staring at the blinking red dot that had appeared 3 minutes ago. Tell me again, she said. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, her communications officer, was a tall, thin man from Georgia who wore his hair shaved close on the sides and longer on top. A style that had somehow survived 400 years of human fashion evolution. He had a voice like a radio announcer and the calm temperament of someone who had decided a long time ago that panic was a waste of energy. He looked at his console, then at Elena, then back at his console. It's a Class 7 distress signal, he said. Standard galactic emergency encoding. Broadcast on all military frequencies simultaneously. It's coming from the Keth Nebula, approximately 3.4 light-years from our current position. And it's looping? Every 90 seconds, yes ma'am. It hasn't changed. No variation in the signal at all. Elena straightened up and looked at the main view screen. The Keth Nebula was visible from here as a soft purple bruise against the black. A vast cloud of gas and ionized particles left over from a supernova that had happened before humans had discovered fire. It was beautiful in the way that truly old things were beautiful, carrying the weight of time in every slow curl of light and color. It was also, according to every chart and database aboard the Resolute, almost entirely uninhabited. Almost. Who's broadcasting it? She asked. Marcus hesitated for just a fraction of a second. That's the thing, Commander. The signal identification code belongs to the Lyhuri. The bridge went quieter than it had been before. Not silent, the hum of systems, the soft beep of sensors, the recycled air through the vents, but the kind of quiet that happens when 47 people all hold their breath at the same time. Elena closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then she opened them. The Lyhuri, she repeated. Not a question. A confirmation. Like pressing your thumb to a bruise to make sure it still hurt. Yes, Commander. The Lyhuri were not supposed to be in this sector. They were not supposed to be capable of broadcasting a Class 7 distress signal. They were not supposed to be doing anything because 14 months ago the Confederation of Allied Species, the great interstellar governing body that humanity had been a junior member of for 60 years, had declared the Lyhuri Accord dissolved. The Lyhuri homeworld, Varesh Prime, had been quarantined. Their fleet had been grounded. Their representatives had been removed from every diplomatic station in known space. The official reason had been species-level biosecurity concerns, which was the polite way of saying that the Lyhuri carried a pathogen that had devastated 2 Vathyri colonies before anyone understood what was happening. The unofficial reason, the one Elena had heard in briefing rooms and officer messes and late-night conversations over bad coffee, was that someone on the Confederation Council had decided that the Lyhuri were too small, too weak, and too inconvenient to protect. The quarantine was a death sentence dressed up in bureaucratic language. A slow, quiet extinction, managed from a safe distance. Earth's delegation had voted against it. They had been outvoted 16-2. Elena had been thinking about that vote for 14 months. What's their ship status? She asked. Lieutenant Commander Sofia Reyes, the ship's tactical officer, pulled up the sensor data on the display between them. Sofia was compact and dark-haired, with a habit of tapping her left index finger on her knee when she was processing something. She was tapping now. The signal origin point is consistent with a stationary source, Sofia said. No propulsion signature. The vessel, if it is a vessel, is not moving. She paused. There are secondary energy readings consistent with a life support system operating on emergency power. I'm also reading. Commander, I'm reading debris fields. How big? Multiple ship signatures. Destroyed. Whatever hit them, it hit them hard. Sophia's finger kept tapping. The debris pattern indicates the attack came from multiple vectors simultaneously. This wasn't a fight. It was an ambush. Elena looked at the red dot on the tactical display for a long moment. Then she looked at the stars beyond the view screen. Then she made a decision that she suspected was going to change her life in ways she couldn't predict. "All stop," she said. "Hold position." "Commander?" Marcus looked up. "I want to think for 60 seconds without us getting any closer to that signal." She turned to face the full bridge crew. They were all watching her, every pair of eyes on the bridge, young and old, experienced and green, everyone waiting. She could feel the weight of their attention like something physical. "We are a Dreadnought-class warship with a crew of 212 people. Whatever destroyed that fleet out there did it comprehensively. I want everyone in this room to understand that before I say another word." Nobody said anything. The hum of the ship continued. Elena walked to the captain's chair, a high-backed seat at the exact center of the bridge, and sat down. She pressed both palms to the armrests, feeling the cool metal under her hands. "Chief Engineer Park," she said. "Commander." Dr. Yuna Park was the oldest person on the bridge by 15 years, a small Korean-American woman with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses she wore pushed up on her forehead even though she had perfect vision. She had been building and fixing ships since before Elena was born. And she had a quality that Elena had come to treasure above almost anything else in a crew member. She told you exactly what was possible, no more and no less. "What's our combat readiness?" "Shields at full capacity," Yuna said without looking up from her console. "Weapons systems online. Point defense grid is warm. Caro drives are charged and ready for emergency jump. We can be combat ready in 30 seconds. And if we need to run? HFY. From this moment forward, we can jump in 8 seconds flat once I get the coordinates locked." Pause. "But Commander, if whatever is out there is big enough to destroy a Lihari military convoy, I want to be honest with you. Our shields will hold for a while, but a while might not be long enough." "Understood." Elena turned to Marcus. "Can you triangulate the signal source more precisely?" "I can get it within 10 kilometers, he said. "Maybe closer if I use the deep-range array." "Do it." She leaned forward. "And Marcus, broadcast a standard humanitarian acknowledgement on the same frequency the distress signal came in on. Let them know someone heard them." Marcus blinked. "Commander, the Lihari are under Confederation quarantine. Responding to their distress signal is technically a violation of—" "I know what it is," Elena said calmly. "Do it." Marcus held her gaze for a moment, then nodded once and turned to his console. Elena looked at the soft purple bruise of the Keth Nebula against the stars and felt the decision settle in her chest like a stone dropping into deep water. The ship that responded to their acknowledgement wasn't what Elena expected. The Lihari vessel was called the Vethkara, which translated approximately as last breath in the common galactic trade language, a name that had probably felt poetic when it was assigned and now felt unbearably accurate. It was a small diplomatic courier ship, roughly a quarter the size of the Resolute, and it was in terrible shape. 3 of its 4 main engine pods were dark. Its outer hull had been breached in at least 6 places. One of its communication arrays was physically gone, just a ragged hole where it had been torn away by an explosion. And it was being held together, apparently, by sheer desperate will. "I'm getting a visual," Marcus said. He put it on the main screen. The Lihari captain appeared, and Elena forced herself not to react visibly. She had read about the Lihari. She had seen photographs and briefings. But photographs were flat and quiet, and this was a living being in crisis, and it was nothing like a photograph. The Lihari were tall. This one was probably 8 feet if she stood upright, though she was leaning against what appeared to be a bent support strut. She had 4 arms, the upper pair larger and used for heavy work, the lower pair more delicate and currently wrapped around what looked like a field-patched power conduit. Her skin was a deep slate blue, shifting subtly toward violet around the joints and facial structures. Her face had 2 large amber-colored eyes set wide apart, a flat, ridge-like nose, and a mouth currently pulled back in what Elena thought might be pain or effort or both. She wore the tattered remains of what had been an officer's uniform, a pale silver garment with a band of darker material at the shoulder indicating rank. Most striking were her eyes. They were steady. Even through the static, even through the damage to the communication system that made the image jump and distort every few seconds, those amber eyes were completely, utterly steady. "Human vessel," the Lihari captain said. Her voice came through the translator implanted in Elena's inner ear as accented but clear. something like a very formal British accent layered over tones that were slightly outside human vocal range. I am Captain Sarah of the diplomatic courier Vethkara, assigned to the Lihari Council of Remaining. I am transmitting under Class 7 emergency protocols. I have. She paused. Elena watched her swallow. I have 41 surviving crew members and 289 civilians aboard this vessel. I was escorting a colony transport. The transport and its 3 escort ships were destroyed approximately 11 hours ago. Elena leaned forward. Captain Sarah. I'm Commander Elena Marsh, U.S. Resolute Earth Defense Force. We received your signal. Can you tell me what attacked your convoy? There was a delay, partially transmission lag, partially something else. They called themselves the Vreth Compact, Captain Sarah said. They are not a recognized species in the Confederation database. We had no record of them. They emerged from the nebula in a formation of 22 vessels and opened fire without communication, without any attempt at warning or negotiation. Her lower hands tightened on the power conduit. They targeted the colony transport first, the one with the civilians. They destroyed it in 4 passes. Another pause. Commander Marsh. My people aboard this vessel include 12 children. I was unable to save the colony transport. I am asking you, under all principles of emergency humanitarian law, to stop, Elena said quietly. Captain Sarah stopped. We're coming, Elena said. The silence that followed was long. Commander Marsh, Captain Sarah said carefully, you are aware that under current Confederation quarantine protocols, any assistance rendered to Lihari nationals constitutes a violation of. Yes, Elena said. Your career. Your ship's standing. Your crew's records. The political consequences for Earth's Confederation membership. Captain Sarah. Elena sat up straighter. I have 47 people on this bridge, and not one of them signed up to leave children to die in a nebula because of a political decision. We're coming. Keep your life support on. Keep your people calm. We'll be there in approximately 22 minutes. Another long silence. When Captain Sarah spoke again, her translator-rendered voice was still formal and precise, but something underneath it had shifted. Something had cracked open just slightly like a door. I will tell my people, she said. The 22 minutes were the longest of Elena's career. She spent them in motion, moving from station to station on the bridge, checking and rechecking systems, listening to her officers give her numbers and readouts, building a picture of what they were flying toward. The debris field around the Vethkara was extensive. 12 separate ship hulls in various states of destruction. The pattern confirmed Sophia's initial assessment. The attack had been coordinated, precise, and utterly overwhelming. These Vreth compact ships had known exactly what they were doing. Any sign they're still in the area? Elena asked. Sophia shook her head slowly. No active drive signatures in the region. Whatever they came in, they took out and left. She hesitated. But Commander, this debris field is fresh. 11 hours old, give or take. And the geometry of the attack pattern is. She turned the holographic display, rotating it to show Elena the angles. They positioned their fleet specifically to cut off any escape route toward the nebula boundary, toward open space. They knew this convoy's route. Elena felt the implication settle. Someone told them. That's my read, yes. Elena stored that thought and kept moving. Marcus, have you raised any Confederation vessels in range? Negative, Commander. Closest Confederation patrol is the Vethkara cruiser Enduring Peace, currently 7 hours away at maximum speed. 7 hours. The Vethkara had been running on emergency power for 11 hours. Life support in a vessel that size, with that level of hull damage that many people aboard. Elena didn't need Una to tell her the numbers weren't good. What about other human vessels? 2 freighters in the sector. No military ships. Marcus looked up. Commander, I've been running continuous sweeps since we acknowledged the signal. There are no other vessels within range moving toward the Vethkara. We are. He paused, choosing his words. We are the only one who answered. Elena nodded once. She already knew that. She had known it the moment she read the signal on the tactical display. She had known it the way you know things that you wish weren't true, completely, immediately, and without any room for doubt. Una, she said. What do we need to prepare for boarding assistance? Una was already typing. I'll have 3 medical teams ready at the main docking bay. I want to bring the Vethkara in close, not a hard dock because I don't trust her structural integrity enough for that, but we can run an umbilical connection if she's got a compatible port. I'll check the specs. Pause. The Lihari breathe a similar atmospheric mix to humans with slightly higher nitrogen content. Not dangerous for us. Our air will be breathable for them, though it might make them uncomfortable. Good enough, Elena said. Let's get ready. 22 minutes passed. The purple bruise of the Keth Nebula filled the view screen completely as they approached, and then they were inside it and the light shifted, the ambient radiation of the nebula giving everything a soft, violet-tinged glow that made the bridge look like something from a dream. Sensor range dropped significantly. The deep-range array became unreliable. Elena felt the familiar prickle at the back of her neck that told her she was somewhere she couldn't fully see, and adjusted her breathing to compensate. Contact, Sophia said quietly. Visual in 5 seconds. The Vethkara appeared on the view screen, and Elena heard someone on the bridge say something under their breath that wasn't quite a word. The photographs had not prepared her. The briefing documents had not prepared her. Nothing had prepared her for the sight of a ship that had survived something like this, because the Vethkara was not just damaged, she was hurt in a way that felt personal, like seeing a living thing that had been beaten and refused to fall. Her hull was scored with long deep gouges from weapons fire. One whole section of her middeck had been blown outward and then partly collapsed inward when the internal pressure changed. Emergency sealing foam, the orange expanding material that automated damage control systems sprayed into breaches, was visible in half a dozen places, bright and incongruous against the dark hull. One of her running lights was still on, a single white light blinking steadily in the violet dark of the nebula, and for reasons Elena could not entirely explain, that blinking light hit her harder than all the damage put together. Someone had kept that light on. Someone had kept that light on because they were hoping someone would come. Bring us alongside, Elena said. Gently. The umbilical connection took 11 minutes to establish. Una handled it personally, standing in the engineering section near the docking bay with a headset on and her sleeves rolled up, talking the Vethkara's surviving engineer through the process on a direct channel. The Lihari engineer's name was Davin, and he was 22 years old and had been awake for the entire 11 hours since the attack, working with 2 damaged hands to keep the ship alive. Una did not talk to him the way you talk to someone you're trying to help. She talked to him the way you talk to a colleague, with specifics and expectations and the steady assumption that he was capable, and Elena, listening on the open channel, thought that was probably the most dignified thing anyone had done for the Lihari in a year and a half. The first Lihari to come through the umbilical was not Captain Sarah. Was a child. She was approximately 4 years old by the developmental markers Elena had been briefed on, which put her at roughly equivalent to a 7-year-old human child. She was wrapped in an emergency thermal blanket that was too large for her and holding the hand of an adult. A Lihari man who was clearly her father, who had 2 of his upper arm wrapped tightly with wound-sealing strips. The little girl looked up at Elena with enormous amber eyes and said something in the Lihari language that the universal translator rendered as, "Is this the human ship?" Elena crouched down, which put her more or less at the child's eye level, and said, "Yes. This is the human ship." The child considered this for a moment with the grave seriousness of small children confronted with new information. Then she said, "Our ship got hurt." "I know," Elena said. "We're going to take care of you now." The child nodded, apparently satisfied, and stepped forward into the docking bay of the Resolute with the complete confidence of someone who has decided that a problem has been solved and is ready to move on to the next thing. Her father followed, and his eyes met Elena's over the child's head, and the look in them was not the look of a diplomat or a soldier or a political subject. It was just the look of a parent who had been terrified for 11 hours and was, for the first time, slightly less terrified, and Elena had to look away because the rawness of it was almost too much to hold. The rest came through after that. It took 40 minutes to transfer all 41 crew members and 289 civilians from the Vethkara to the Resolute. Elena's medical teams were waiting. She had 3 full teams, 22 personnel, plus the ship's chief medical officer, Dr. Raymond Cole, a heavy-set man from Chicago who had been doing emergency medicine in space for 20 years and who processed the incoming Lihari with the efficient, unhurried focus of someone who had seen worse and intended to fix what was in front of him right now. 83 of the civilians needed immediate medical attention. 11 of those were critical. Captain Sarah came through last. She ducked her head to fit through the umbilical. The passage had been designed for humans and was about 18 inches too short for her, and straightened on the Resolute side with the careful, controlled movement of someone who was in significant pain but had decided not to show it. She was taller than Elena had realized from the view screen. Standing in the docking bay, she was almost 8.5 feet tall, and the lower pair of her arms was held slightly differently from the upper pair. One of them, Elena noticed, was moving wrong. Bent at an angle that the joint clearly wasn't designed for. Captain Sarah, Elena said. Welcome aboard the Resolute. Commander Marsh. Captain Sarah's amber eyes moved around the docking bay slowly, taking in the human crew members, the medical equipment, the lights, the scale of the ship. Whatever she was feeling, her face was composed. I am in your debt. You're my guest, Elena said simply. Can I get one of my medical team to look at your arm? Pause. It can wait. It really can't, said Dr. Cole, appearing at Elena's elbow without having been summoned, because Raymond Cole had a gift for appearing at elbows when his opinion was medically relevant. He looked up at Captain Sarah with the same expression he gave everyone, complete professional attention with no detectable intimidation whatsoever. That's a dislocation and probably a hairline fracture in the secondary joint. If you keep using it without treatment, you're going to tear the connective tissue and we'll be having a much longer conversation. Captain Sarah looked at Dr. Cole for a long moment. He's right, Elena said. Also, he's very good. Captain Sarah looked back at Elena. Something moved in those amber eyes that might have been, in human terms, amusement. Very well, she said. While Dr. Cole led Captain Sarah toward the medical bay, Elena turned back to the docking bay and began organizing the work that needed to happen next. 289 civilians in a ship designed for 212 crew was tight, but not impossible. She converted 3 of the ship's secondary cargo bays into temporary housing. The Resolute carried modular habitat equipment for exactly this kind of emergency scenario, a fact that Elena had always thought of as optimistic forward planning and now understood as prophecy. She was organizing bunk assignments when Marcus found her. Commander, he said. His voice was different from its usual radio announcer calm. Tighter. You need to hear this. The transmission had been routed through a relay beacon in the outer edge of the sector. It was addressed to the Resolute by name. Elena listened to it twice, standing in the communications bay with Marcus beside her and the speaker volume turned low. It was from Admiral James Conroy. Commander Marsh, the Admiral's voice said, clipped and precise in the way that meant he was choosing every word with care because he was aware that a record was being made. We are aware that you have received the Lyhuri distress signal from the Keth Nebula sector. You are ordered to maintain current heading and not to respond. The Lyhuri quarantine is a binding Confederation resolution under emergency health protocols, and any vessel of the Earth Defense Force that provides assistance to quarantined Lyhuri nationals will be in violation of Treaty Article 17, Section 4. The political consequences for Earth's Confederation standing would be significant. I know you understand what's at stake. A pause, and in that pause Elena heard something she hadn't expected. Something that sounded just barely like an apology. I'm sorry, Elena. Those are the orders. Conroy out. The transmission ended. Elena stood in the communications bay for a moment, listening to the silence. He sent it before we acknowledged the signal, Marcus said quietly. It was already in transit when we made our decision. He's been monitoring the sector. I know, Elena said. Commander. Marcus hesitated. What do we do? Elena took a slow breath through her nose, held it for 3 seconds and let it out. We are currently inside the Keth Nebula, she said. Sensor interference is significant. Deep-range communication is unreliable. She looked at Marcus. Make a note in the ship's log that we received Admiral Conroy's transmission and are experiencing difficulty with our communications array. We'll respond when we're clear of the nebula. Marcus blinked. That's not entirely accurate, Commander. Marcus, Elena said. How many children came through that umbilical? Pause. 12. Marcus said. Right, Elena said. Make the note. Marcus looked at her for another moment. Then he nodded once, slowly, and turned to his console. Elena walked back toward the main medical bay. She had a captain to check on and a crisis to manage and absolutely no idea what she was going to do about any of the political consequences currently building on the other side of the nebula like a storm she couldn't yet see. She knew they were there. She knew they were coming for her. She knew that the moment the Resolute cleared the nebula's interference, she was going to be one of the most wanted officers in the Earth Defense Force. Not for doing something wrong, but for doing something right, which was in some ways worse because at least if you did something wrong, there was a clear path to fixing it. But right now, she had 289 Lyhuri civilians on her ship, and 11 of them were critical and 12 of them were children, and somewhere in this nebula there were 22 Vreth compact warships whose purpose she didn't yet understand. She walked faster. The medical bay of the Resolute was designed to handle 30 patients at peak capacity. Dr. Raymond Cole had somehow expanded it to handle 63. He had moved non-critical equipment out of 2 adjoining storage rooms, requisitioned every portable medical unit on the ship, and set up a triage system that sorted patients by urgency with the clinical precision of a man who had spent 2 decades making impossible situations slightly more possible. The medical staff moved between patients with the quick, quiet efficiency of people who knew exactly what they were doing and were doing it as fast as they safely could. Elena stood in the doorway for a moment and watched. She had served with Raymond Cole for 2 years and she had always respected him, but watching him in this bay working on patients whose anatomy he had probably been reading up on for the last 40 minutes, she felt something beyond respect. He was explaining to one of his nurses how to interpret the Lahiri cardiovascular monitoring readouts with the calm confidence of someone teaching a skill, not improvising in a crisis, even though that was exactly what he was doing. Captain Sarah was seated on a medical bed in the corner of the bay, her injured arm resting in a stabilizing brace. She was watching the same thing Elena was watching. "Your doctor is skilled," she said as Elena crossed to her. "He is," Elena agreed. She pulled over a chair that was about 18 inches too short for the height difference between them and sat in it anyway. "How's the arm?" "Manageable." Captain Sarah's amber eyes moved from the medical bay to Elena. "You have treated us as guests. You are guests. Under Confederation law we are quarantine subjects. There are procedures for—" "Captain Sarah," Elena said. "I'm going to be very direct with you because I think you're the kind of person who prefers directness." The Lahiri captain's head tilted slightly, a gesture that the briefing documents had described as equivalent to a human raising an eyebrow. "I received orders not to respond to your distress signal before I responded to your distress signal," Elena said. "I responded anyway. That decision is made. I'm not going to have a philosophical debate about it now because we have more immediate problems. What I need from you is everything you know about the Vreth Compact." Captain Sarah studied her for a long moment. Then she said, "What I know is limited. What I suspect is worse. Start with what you know. The Vreth Compact are not in any Confederation database because they have deliberately avoided contact with Confederation space for approximately 2 centuries. They are a collective of 4 species, all from a region of space well beyond our current charted territories, united under a military governance structure." She paused. "They made contact with the Lahiri Council of Remaining 6 weeks ago. Through a private channel. They offered us." Another pause. A long one. "They offered us a territory. A new homeworld. Resources. Protection." Her voice remained controlled. "In exchange for navigational data." Elena felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise. What kind of navigational data? Confederation patrol routes. Defensive installation coordinates. Jump lane vulnerabilities. Captain Sarah's amber eyes met Elena's steadily. They wanted a complete strategic map of Confederation space. They framed it as the price of our survival. "And the Lahiri Council?" said no. Captain Sarah's jaw tightened. The Council of Remaining rejected the offer immediately and reported it through back channels to 2 sympathetic Confederation members. Within 10 days, the Vreth Compact fleet appeared in this sector and destroyed our diplomatic convoy. She let the implication hang in the air for a moment. Someone told the Vreth Compact that we had rejected their offer. Someone who knew about it from the back-channel report. Someone inside the Confederation. Elena sat with that for a moment. The picture it painted was precise and ugly. The Lahiri, already weakened and isolated by the quarantine, had been specifically targeted after refusing to betray the Confederation. They had been attacked by an outside power. And someone inside the Confederation had helped that outside power find them. "You need to report this to the Confederation Council," Elena said. Captain Sarah looked at her with an expression that was, even across the enormous physiological differences between their species, clearly readable as, "You are not thinking about this correctly." "Commander Marsh," she said carefully. "The Council of Remaining sent its report through back channels because official channels are unreliable. The quarantine has left us with no official channels at all. I cannot report anything to the Confederation. I am, legally speaking, not allowed to exist in the same sector of space as any of them." Elena closed her eyes briefly. "Open them. Then you'll report it through me. You are already facing serious professional consequences for assisting us. To also make this report." "Captain Sarah." Elena kept her voice even. 12 children came through my umbilical today. 11 critical patients are in my medical bay right now. Your convoy was ambushed because you refused to betray the same organization that's been slowly strangling your people for a year and a half. And someone in that organization helped get your people killed." She stood up. "You should know something about humans. We have a word, Caro. It means roughly, let's go. As in, Let's go do the thing that needs doing even though it's hard. It's not a battle cry. It's just a decision. She looked at Captain Sarah steadily. I've made mine. Now let me work. Captain Sarah looked at her for a long moment. Caro, she said. The translator rendered it exactly as Elena had said it. The pronunciation was different, smoother with a different inflection, but the word was the same. Elena nodded once and went back to work. 6 hours after the Resolute brought the survivors of the Vethkara aboard, the ship's long-range sensors picked up something new. Sophia found Elena in the ship's compact command briefing room, where Elena had been reviewing the sensor logs from the attack site, eating a protein bar she had not tasted at all, and composing in her head the response to Admiral Conroy that she was going to have to send once they cleared the nebula. Sophia put a tablet on the table in front of her without saying anything, because after 2 years together, they had developed a vocabulary of gestures that substituted for words in situations where words felt insufficient. Elena looked at the tablet. Drive signatures, she said. 22 of them, Sophia confirmed. Emerging from deep inside the nebula. Bearing 274. They're moving toward our position. Elena looked at the readout, then at Sophia, then back at the readout. Time to contact? Approximately 4 hours at their current speed. Sophia sat down across the table. Her left index finger was tapping on her knee. Commander, there's something else. Their formation is. She reached over and rotated the holographic display built into the briefing table to show Elena the sensor picture. They're not moving in a combat formation. They're moving in a transit pattern. Like they're going somewhere and we happen to be in the way. Elena stared at the formation. 22 ships in a loose column, moving with purpose. Where are they going? If I extrapolate their heading? Sophia traced the line with her finger through the holographic display, through the nebula, out the other side across the sector map until it aligned with something specific. She stopped her finger. Elena looked at where it stopped. It stopped at the Confederation border station Kappa 7, one of the major transit hubs for commercial and diplomatic traffic entering and leaving Confederation space. A station with maybe 4,000 civilian personnel and a defensive contingent of 6 patrol ships. SYMJHY, Elena murmured. Sophia looked at her. Commander? It's something my grandfather used to say, Elena said. When something was bigger than expected. She straightened. They're not here for us. They were never here for us. The convoy attack was a secondary objective. They're making a run on Kappa 7. That's my assessment, Sophia said. 1 Dreadnought against 22 compact warships, Elena said. Not a question. Working the numbers. We don't have reliable data on their weapons capabilities, Sophia said. The debris field from the convoy ambush gives us some data. The attack was fast and effective, but the Lihari escort ships were military-grade frigates, not dreadnoughts. We have significantly better shielding and firepower than anything in that convoy. She paused. But 22 ships is 22 ships. Elena nodded. She was quiet for a moment. What's the Vreth formation sensor blind spot? Sophia blinked. Sorry? Every formation has one. A geometric vulnerability in their sensor coverage. What's theirs? Sophia pulled up the formation data again, rotating it, measuring angles. If you approached from bearing 310 relative to their column axis, there's a gap between ships 7 and 8 in their formation. If you were small enough and quiet enough, you could get within approximately 40 kilometers before they'd pick you up. Not us, Elena said. But a shuttle might. Sophia stared at her. Commander, what are you thinking? Elena was already standing. I'm thinking that we need to send a message to Kappa 7 faster than those ships can get there. And I'm thinking that we can't broadcast it because the nebula will scatter the signal and the compact might intercept it. And I'm thinking, she said, moving toward the door, that we have 1 compact ship killer in our arsenal that they definitely haven't encountered before. Sophia followed her. Which is? Elena looked over her shoulder. A human who's been told there are children in danger. The pilot's name was Sergeant Danny Ortega. He was 26 years old, from Albuquerque, a compact, cheerful person with dark eyes and the kind of hands that were always moving, drumming on surfaces, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting, folding and unfolding a small paper crane that he kept in his left breast pocket. He had been flying shuttle missions in contested space for 3 years. He had an excellent record and a documented tendency to make decisions that his superiors called creative and his friends called insane, and he was Elena's first choice the moment she thought of this plan. She found him in the shuttle bay running pre-flight checks on the Resolute's fastest courier shuttle, a small, sleek ship called the Arrow, with the methodical focus of someone who loved what he did. "Sergeant Ortega," she said. He turned around and saw the look on her face and stopped drumming his hands. "Commander, what do we need?" Elena told him. He listened to the full plan without interrupting, which was notable because Danny Ortega was a person who interrupted constantly in normal circumstances. When she was done, he was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "So," he said, "you want me to fly the Arrow through a 22-ship formation of alien warships whose capabilities we don't fully understand, navigate through the sensor blind spot between positions 7 and 8, emerge on the far side of their fleet, and then run at maximum speed to Kappa 7 to warn them?" "Yes," Elena said. "And while I'm doing that, you're going to be doing what, exactly?" "Making sure they don't turn around and chase you," Elena said. Danny absorbed this. His hand went to his breast pocket, touched the paper crane inside without taking it out. "And if they do turn around and chase me?" "The Arrow is faster than anything in their formation by about 30%, Elena said. "You'll make it. And if something's not in their formation is faster?" Elena held his gaze. "Then we'll have other problems." Danny looked at the Arrow. He looked at Elena. He looked at the data tablet she was holding with the formation map on it. He nodded once, slowly, with the air of someone who had decided. "When do I go?" 2 hours, Elena said. "I need to prep the Resolute first." "Caro," Danny said and grinned and turned back to his pre-flight checks. Elena spent the 2 hours in constant motion. She went first to the medical bay. Dr. Cole had stabilized all 11 critical patients. She stood in the doorway and watched the bay for 60 seconds, counting breaths, not from anxiety, but because she had learned early that the fastest way to center yourself before something dangerous was to count breaths, and 50 to 60 seconds of counting was usually enough. Then she went to find Captain Sarah. She found her in the temporary housing bay, one of the converted cargo holds, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall and her long legs folded at the knee, surrounded by a cluster of Lihari children. She was telling them a story in the Lihari language, gesturing with her upper arms while her lower arms were held still in her lap. Her damaged arm was still in the stabilizing brace. The children were wrapped. 4 of them were very small, 3 were older, and they were all looking at her with the specific focused attention of children who are being told something they believe matters. Elena stood in the doorway of the cargo bay and did not interrupt. The story ended after about 5 minutes. The children dispersed to their families. Captain Sarah looked up and saw Elena. "You were there for a while?" she said. "I didn't want to interrupt," Elena said. She came in and sat down on a cargo container. "What was the story?" "An old one," Captain Sarah said. "About a navigator who got lost between the stars. She didn't have any charts and her ship's instruments were broken, and she was very afraid." Pause. "But she knew that the stars don't move. She knew them well enough to navigate by them alone, because she had spent her whole life learning their names. So she made it home." Elena looked at the amber eyes looking back at her. "Is it a real story? From your history?" "From very old history, yes." Captain Sarah tilted her head. "The navigator was the first Lihari to make a transit between systems without modern instruments. It was..." She paused, searching for words. "It was 700 years ago. We still teach the story to children. We teach it because the message is not about navigation. The message is about knowing enough to find your way even when everything you relied on is gone." Elena sat with that for a moment. "Captain Sarah," she said, "I need to tell you what's happening." She told her. The drive signatures. The compact fleet moving toward Kappa 7. The plan to send Danny through the formation. Her own plan for the Resolute. Captain Sarah listened with the same stillness she brought to everything. When Elena was done, she said, "You are going to fight them." "I'm going to slow them down," Elena corrected. "There's a difference. 1 dreadnought against 22 vessels. We don't need to destroy them," Elena said. "We need to buy time. Enough time for Kappa 7 to get its defenses online, evacuate civilians and call for backup." She paused. "And enough time for the Confederation to hear what you told me about the mole. The person who gave up your convoy's location. If we can get that information to the right people before those ships reach Kappa 7, the Confederation will not act on information from a quarantined species," Captain Sarah said, not harshly, as a statement of observed fact. "No," Elena agreed. "But they might act on information from a human officer with a perfect service record who is currently committing career suicide to protect their border station." She met Captain Sarah's eyes. "I'm hoping that buys me about 5 minutes of credibility." The Lihari captain was quiet for a moment. "You said you had made your decision," she said. "When you said Caro." Yes. Is this what you meant? Yes, Elena said. Captain Sarah unfolded from the floor with the careful grace of someone managing pain. She stood at her full height in the cargo bay, and in the utilitarian lighting of the converted space, she looked less like a damaged diplomat and more like what Elena suspected she actually was. A person who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and had not put it down. Then I will tell you everything I know about the Vreth Compact, she said. Every detail from the contact 6 weeks ago. Everything they said that might help you understand how they fight and how they think. She paused. HFY, from this moment, Commander, I will give you everything I have. It is not much, but it is yours. Elena stood up. It's enough, she said. Let's start. The briefing lasted 90 minutes. Captain Sarah had a perfect memory, not the kind that humans called photographic, and usually meant pretty good, but a literal, complete recall of auditory and visual information that was a standard Lihari cognitive trait, according to Elena's briefing materials. Everything she told Elena was precise. Dates, words, exact phrasing of what the compact representatives had said. The tones of their voices. The configuration of their ships as she had seen them on the Vethkara sensor displays during the attack. Sitting across from Captain Sarah with Marcus beside her taking notes on a tablet, Elena learned several things about the Vreth Compact that mattered. First, they were not irrational. The attack on the convoy had not been a message or a punishment in the emotional sense that humans used those words. It had been a calculated removal of a loose end. The Lihari delegation had rejected the deal and then reported it, which made them both a liability and a potential source of intelligence for the Confederation. The compact had eliminated that liability with the same flat efficiency of someone closing a file. Second, their ships relied heavily on coordinated mass attack. The formation that had destroyed the Lihari convoy had worked by overwhelming a smaller number of defending ships simultaneously, attacking from multiple angles to prevent any single defender from prioritizing targets. Against a single large, well-armored ship, like a Dreadnought, that tactic became less effective, because a Dreadnought's point defense grid was specifically designed to handle simultaneous multi-vector attacks. Third, they were not used to losing ships. The compact had not fought a major engagement in over 60 years. Their military was well-equipped but doctrinally rigid. They trained against known enemies in known scenarios, and they were not adaptive to unexpected situations. Captain Sarah had gleaned this from the phrasing of the compact's representatives during the meeting. The casual confidence, the way they spoke about the Confederation's military capacity as if it were already fully understood, fully quantified, fully compensated for. They don't know what a Dreadnought does, Elena thought. Not really. They've read about it. They've estimated. They haven't felt it. Fourth and most important, the compact fleet had a command ship. One vessel in the formation, Position 3, according to Captain Sarah's description of the sensor image during the attack, had been giving orders that the other ships responded to with a lag that suggested centralized tactical command. If that vessel were neutralized, the coordination of the formation would break down. Elena absorbed all of this and said very little during the briefing. She asked precise questions. She had Marcus draw the formation on his tablet and annotated it with everything Captain Sarah told her. She built a mental model of what was coming toward them and tested it, slowly looking for the places where it would break. By the time they were done, she had a plan. It was not a comfortable plan. It was not the kind of plan that anyone would enjoy executing, or that any subsequent inquiry would call textbook. But it was a plan that could work, and in Elena's experience, that was usually enough. She dismissed Marcus and sat alone with Captain Sarah for a moment. You should stay in the medical bay during the engagement, Elena said. I should be of use, Captain Sarah said. You are of use. You've given me everything I needed. Elena paused. Can I ask you something that's not about tactics? Yes. The story you were telling the children. The navigator. Elena looked at her hands. Did she make it home? Captain Sarah's amber eyes held something quiet. Yes, she said. She made it home. She was gone for 4 years and her family had given her up for dead. But she came home. Pause. And she spent the rest of her life teaching others to read the stars the way she did. So that if it happened again they would know. Elena nodded slowly. Good story, she said. She stood up and went back to the bridge and got ready for the fight. The Resolute moved through the nebula like something hunting. Elena had ordered all non-essential lighting reduced, a combat precaution that also had the psychological effect of making the ship feel quieter, more focused, more itself. The bridge operated on instrument light and the faint violet glow that came through the forward view screen from the nebula around them. Everyone was at their station. Nobody was talking unnecessarily. Danny Ortega launched the Arrow from the shuttle bay at 0300 ship time. Elena watched the small ship's drive signature on the tactical display as it moved away from the Resolute, small and fast, picking its way toward the gap in the compact formation with the careful patience of a person threading a needle. She had given Danny the formation data, the sensor blind spot coordinates, and a preloaded message package addressed to Kappa 7 and the nearest Earth Defense Force command station. The message contained everything: the compact fleet's heading, their weapons data as estimated from the convoy debris, Captain Sarah's account of the mole in the Confederation Council, and Elena's own official report of the events of the past 14 hours. She had also included something unofficial. She had recorded a personal message for Admiral Conroy. She had spent about 3 minutes deciding what to say, and had ended up saying something very simple: that she understood the consequences of her choices, that she accepted them, and that she hoped he would read the full report before making any decisions. She had not apologized. She had considered it and decided that apologizing for the right thing was a kind of lie she wasn't willing to tell, even to a man she respected. She watched the Arrow's drive signature grow smaller on the display. "He's in the blind spot," Sophia said. "They haven't detected him." "Good," Elena said. She turned her attention to the compact formation, now 3 hours and 14 minutes away. 22 ships. Position 3, the command ship. Between her and Kappa 7. "All stations," she said. "Combat readiness. This is not a drill." The bridge crew responded with the quiet, precise movements of people who had trained for this and were ready for it and were afraid in exactly the right amount, enough to be sharp, not enough to be stupid. "Sophia," Elena said. "Target the command ship at position 3 with our forward rail cannons as soon as we have a clean firing solution." "Understood." Pause. "Commander, we're going to be well within their weapons range when we get that solution." "Yes," Elena said. "They're going to hit us." "Yes," Elena said again. "And when they do, I want you to notice the difference between getting hit by 22 coordinated ships and getting hit by 22 ships that have just lost their tactical coordinator." Sophia's fingers stopped tapping. Then started again. "You want to break their coordination first. The moment we kill that command ship," Elena said, "we go from fighting a 22-ship formation to fighting 22 individual ships. 22 individual ships are still a lot. But it's a different problem." She settled in her chair. "We can handle different problems." The timer on the tactical display counted down. 2 hours, 50 minutes, 16 seconds. Elena drank bad coffee, studied the sensor data, and waited. The Vreth compact fleet emerged from the deeper nebula gas like something from a bad dream. They were bigger than Elena had expected. Or rather, they were more numerous in a way that hit her differently on the view screen than it had on the tactical display. On the display they were blinking symbols. On the view screen, they were actual ships, spread across a wide front, their running lights a cold blue that contrasted sharply with the violet of the nebula. They moved with a precision that spoke to their training: tight formation, uniform spacing, smooth and coordinated. She had expected to see their communication lights increase as they spotted the Resolute on their sensors. She watched and saw them do exactly that. "They're lighting up," Marcus said. "Intership communication. Heavy traffic." "They weren't expecting to find us here," Sophia said. "No," Elena said. "They expected an empty corridor into Confederation space." She kept her eyes on the view screen. "How long to a firing solution on the command ship?" "For minutes," Sophia said. "We need to close the range." "Close the range," Elena confirmed. The Resolute moved forward. The compact fleet's formation shifted, not dramatically but perceptibly. They were adjusting. Responding. The column began to spread slightly at the front, like a fist unclenching to become a hand. "They're transitioning from transit formation to attack formation," Sophia said. "They know we're here and they're reconfiguring." "How long for the reconfiguration?" "At this speed? 6 minutes. Maybe 7. "We have 4, Elena said. "Go." The Resolute accelerated. The compact ships responded. The lead elements of their formation pushed forward to intercept, and Elena felt the first weapon impacts on the shields almost immediately. They were not light hits. The compact ships were running what appeared to be a form of focused particle beam weapon. The shield displays flickered and the ship shuddered, not catastrophically but noticeably, the kind of shudder that went through the soles of your feet and reminded you that the thing keeping you alive was exactly as real as the things trying to end it. "Shields at 82%, Una reported from engineering. Point defense engaging multiple targets. We've got debris from a near miss on the port quarter. Maintain heading," Elena said. More hits. The bridge lights flickered once and came back. Someone at a rear console cursed briefly and then was quiet. Firing solution in 90 seconds, Sophia said. Her voice was completely even. The compact fleet was fully in attack formation now, or most of it was. The front half had reconfigured. The back half was still transitioning. There was a brief, structural messiness in their formation that wouldn't last long. Sophia, Elena said. The moment we have the solution, fire all forward rail cannons and full salvo. Everything we have. All forward cannons. Understood. 60 seconds. The Resolute shook again, a harder impact this time, shields down to 71%. Una was running damage reports in real time on Elena's command display, a stream of numbers that Elena read without looking away from the view screen. Port shield array stressed but holding. Point defense grid at full efficiency. 2 crew members in maintenance corridor 7 injured by vibration. Minor. 30 seconds. Commander, Marcus said. The arrow is clear of the formation. It's an open space. Danny's running for Kappa 7. Elena let out a breath she hadn't fully realized she was holding. Good. 10 seconds. Solution acquired, Sophia said. Her finger was very still. Fire, Elena said. The Resolute fired everything. The rail cannons of an Earth dreadnought were not designed to be pretty. They were designed to be final. Each rail cannon fired a tungsten alloy projectile approximately the size of a small vehicle, accelerated to a significant fraction of the speed of light using a magnetic acceleration track that ran the full length of the ship's keel. The Resolute had 6 forward rail cannons. A full forward salvo was 6 projectiles in the air simultaneously, and the point of full forward salvos was not to hit a target once. It was to saturate a volume of space with so much fast-moving mass that either the target was hit or the target had to maneuver so aggressively to avoid being hit that it ceased to be useful as a tactical asset for the next several minutes. The compact command ship had not encountered this before. Elena watched on the tactical display as 4 of the 6 projectiles connected. The command ship did not explode. It was not vaporized. It was hit hard, its shields absorbing the first 2 impacts and failing on the third, the 4th projectile making direct contact with its hull. The sensor picture showed a ship that was suddenly moving wrong, leaking drive plasma from at least 2 points, its communication output dropping from the constant heavy traffic they'd been watching to a sharp, sudden silence. Then the tactical picture changed. The compact formation, so precise, so coordinated, so clearly trained and drilled, did not collapse. But it hesitated. For 4 seconds, the entire fleet of 22 ships paused in its movement while the command systems tried to route to a secondary commander. In those 4 seconds, the formation went from a cohesive tactical unit to 22 ships with the same general intention but no coordinated execution. Hit them while they're thinking, Elena said. Sophia was already doing it. The Resolute turned hard to starboard, bringing the side weapons array to bear, and began a systematic hammering of the nearest compact vessels. These were not the massive rail cannon salvos. Those took time to reload. These were the ship's energy weapons, which fired in continuous bursts and were specifically designed for sustained engagement against multiple targets. The point defense grid, still handling the incoming fire from the compact ships, was simultaneously tracking and engaging any projectiles or missiles launched against the Resolute. The compact ships were firing. They were all still firing. The Resolute's shields were taking continuous punishment and Una was managing it in real time, rerouting power from non-critical systems to reinforce sections under the heaviest stress. But they were no longer firing together. They were firing individually from different positions at different times, without the coordinated timing that would have maximized their combined effect. It was still 22 ships against 1. But it was a different problem. And Elena could handle different problems. Marcus, she said, raising her voice slightly over the sound of impacts and system alarms. Is the secondary message relay active? Yes, Commander. Broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. Good. She turned back to the view screen. Una status. Shields at 58%. 2 rail cannon rails offline for still operational. Point defense running hot but holding. Main drive at full capacity. Jump drive is ready. I can have us out of here in 8 seconds if you give the word. Not yet, Elena said. How long can we hold at this rate? Pause. 40 minutes. Maybe 45. I need 60, Elena said. Another pause. Then I need to get creative. You always do, Elena said. Get creative. 37 minutes into the engagement, the Resolute had destroyed or disabled 7 compact vessels. This was not what Elena had expected. She had expected to survive the engagement, to slow the compact fleet, to buy time for Kappa 7 and buy time for Danny to deliver his message. She had not expected to be effective in the way that they were actually being effective. The reason for this, she realized, was something she had read in a briefing document once and had filed away and only now fully understood. The compact had been fighting in the outer dark for 60 years, against opponents who used similar technology, similar tactics, similar doctrines. They had not fought humans. And there was something about the way humans fought, something about the specific chaos of a human crew under pressure, the way Elena's officers made decisions in the moment, the way the Resolute systems had been designed for exactly this kind of sustained, messy engagement, that the compact's doctrine had no specific counter to. They were adapting. Elena could see it on the tactical display. The remaining 15 compact vessels were slowly, imperfectly, but noticeably changing their approach. They were clustering into smaller subgroups, trying to recreate something like coordinated attack without the command ship to coordinate it. They were learning. They just needed more time to finish learning than Elena was willing to give them. Rail cannons recharged, Sophia reported. Ready for salvo. Target the largest subgroup, Elena said. Position 9 through 14 in the new formation. Full salvo. Targeting. Firing. Another salvo. Another wave of impacts through the ship. Another entry on the tactical display showing 2 more compact vessels going dark. One destroyed, one apparently intact but not maneuvering, probably crippled. Shields at 39%. Una, Elena said. How are we doing? I'm running out of creative, Una said. Her voice was still even, but it was the evenness of someone spending the last of something carefully. I've rerouted everything I can reroute. Shields are holding at 39, but it's costing us life support reserve power to do it. We can maintain for about 15 more minutes at this level. After that we jump, Elena said. Yes, Una said. Yes, we do. 15 minutes. Elena looked at the tactical display. 13 compact vessels still functional. Compact fleet's heading had shifted. They were no longer moving directly toward Kappa 7. The engagement had pushed them off course, costing them time and forcing them to re-navigate. Even if they broke off the fight right now and jumped to maximum speed, they had lost approximately 3 hours of travel time. 3 hours was enough. Danny was already most of the way to Kappa 7. The message had been received. Marcus had confirmation from the station's automated response beacon. The station's defenses would be online. Reinforcements would be called. 3 hours was enough. Prepare to jump, Elena said. Set coordinates for the Lihari refugee processing point at Station Helios 4. Marcus looked at her. Commander, Helios 4 is a civilian medical facility. It's not. It has the largest medical bay in this sector that isn't under Confederation military jurisdiction, Elena said. Our Lihari guests need it. She looked around the bridge, at the faces of her crew, some of them scratched and bruised from the violence of the engagement, all of them alert, all of them still there. We're done here. We bought the time. Now we go. All stations confirmed jump readiness, Sophia said. Confirmed, Una said. SYMJHY, from this moment we're ready to run. Jump, Elena said. The Resolute jumped. The jump took 11 seconds of objective time. It felt longer, the way jumps always felt longer. The subjective experience of faster-than-light travel was something that physicists had argued about for 300 years and had never fully resolved. Some crew members experienced it as a brief blankness. Some experienced it as a flash of color. Some experienced nothing at all. Elena experienced it as she always did, as a moment of complete, absolute stillness, like being underwater in a very quiet lake, and then the bridge was back and the stars were different and they were somewhere else. Station Helios 4 was visible almost immediately on the sensors. A large, wheel-shaped structure in stable orbit around a gas giant, lit against the darkness with the warm lights of a working facility. Hail them, Elena said. Tell them we're coming in with 330 Lihari nationals in need of emergency medical assistance and that we are officially requesting humanitarian docking rights under Galactic Treaty Article 81. Yes, Commander. Marcus was already working. Elena sat back in her chair. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not, exactly, but that was a private matter. She had destroyed or disabled 9 compact warships. She had delayed the fleet's attack on Kappa 7 by at least 3 hours, probably more. She had delivered the warning and the intelligence about the Confederation mole. She had gotten 330 Lihari nationals out of a dying ship and into a medical facility where they could be treated. She had also violated 14 separate regulations, 3 Confederation treaty articles, and 2 direct orders from a superior officer. She sat quietly with all of that. The door to the bridge opened and Captain Sarah entered. She moved carefully, avoiding crew members, and made her way to stand beside Elena's chair. She was quiet for a moment, looking at the view screen and the station beyond it. "You fought them," she said. "Yes." "How did it go?" "We're here," Elena said simply. "So did you." Captain Sarah looked at her for a long moment. "Commander Marsh," she said. "I have been a diplomat for 23 years. I have worked with Vathyrai, with Galari, with Shorath and Eileni and the Confederation's senior species. I have been in many difficult negotiations." She paused. "I have never met anyone who fights the way humans fight." "We take it personally," Elena said. "Yes," Captain Sarah said. "I noticed." Elena almost smiled. "The children are safe?" she asked. "All 12, Captain Sarah confirmed. "They are currently in Cargo Bay 3, and a young man named Davin has organized them into what appears to be an improvised lesson about how jump drives work. He is using his hands and a set of cargo straps to demonstrate." Pause. "I think he is not entirely accurate. But they are engaged." This time Elena did smile. She looked back at the view screen. Station Helios 4 was growing larger as the Resolute approached. Somewhere behind them, in the Keth Nebula, 13 damaged compact warships were reassessing their options. Somewhere ahead, at Kappa 7, a station was going to full alert and calling for reinforcements that would now actually come. And somewhere in the Confederation Council, a person who had betrayed the Lihari to the Vreth Compact was going to hear about an Earth dreadnought that had walked into their operation and complicated it significantly. Elena was looking forward to that part. Helios 4 was not prepared for the Resolute. Not physically. The station's docking systems were designed to accommodate vessels much larger than the Resolute, which was not a surprise for a facility that served as a major medical transfer point. What the station was not prepared for was the Resolute specifically, with its specific cargo and its specific cargo's specific implications. Commander Helios 4 Station Director Priya Anand met them at the docking collar personally. Priya was a small, sharp-featured woman in her mid-50s, with close-cropped gray hair and the look of someone who had been managing complicated situations in difficult environments for long enough that she had developed an expression of permanent, unflappable assessment. She looked at Elena, then at the stream of Lihari civilians beginning to come through the docking collar under the supervision of Dr. Cole's medical teams, then back at Elena. "Commander Marsh," she said. "I've been following your signal for the last 40 minutes. You're either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," Elena said. "We have 11 critical patients who need intensive care immediately, and about 300 more who need assessment and treatment in roughly that order of priority. We also have 38 Lihari crew members who are in reasonable condition but will need follow-up care and temporary housing." "And you're invoking Article 81, Priya said. "Humanitarian docking rights," Elena confirmed. "They were in imminent danger of death when I responded to their distress signal. The Confederation quarantine doesn't supersede emergency humanitarian protocols." Priya looked at her for a moment. "That is a creative legal argument." "My communications officer told me the same thing," Elena said. "Are you going to help?" Priya looked at the Lihari civilians coming through, an older couple supporting each other, a woman carrying a sleeping infant wrapped tightly, a group of young men who looked exhausted and relieved and overwhelmed in equal measure. She watched them for a moment. "Yes," she said. "Come in." The next 18 hours were the most complex logistics problem Elena had solved in her career. She worked alongside Priya and her station staff to integrate the Lihari civilians into the station's medical and housing capacity, which required creative thinking about atmospheric conditions, dietary requirements and sleep cycle differences. Dr. Cole and the station's chief medical officer, a Vathyrai doctor named Thessan, compared notes and worked out a treatment protocol for the Lihari patients that neither of them had used before, because nobody had written one, and they wrote it as they went, systematically, each adding to the document as they learned something new. Elena was in the station command center when the first official Confederation communication arrived. It was from the Confederation Secretary General's office. Not Admiral Conroy. The Secretary General. She read it with Marcus beside her and Priya reading over her shoulder. The message stated that the Resolute was to hold position at Helios 4 pending a formal inquiry into the violation of treaty articles, the unauthorized engagement of the Vreth Compact, and the deliberate circumvention of Confederation quarantine orders. Commander Elena Marsh was relieved of command pending the inquiry. A Confederation military vessel would arrive within 48 hours to take custody of the Resolute and its crew. Elena read the message twice. Then she set it down on the table. Well, Priya said. Yeah, Elena said. 48 hours, Marcus said. He was looking at the message with an expression that was trying not to be angry and mostly failing. They're giving us 48 hours. Or taking 48 hours, Elena said. Depending on how you look at it. She stood up, stretched her back, and picked up a cup of coffee, actual coffee, not the ship's synthesized version, because Helios 4 ran a proper coffee supplier and Elena had immediately identified this as one of the station's greatest qualities. What's the status on the Kappa 7 situation? Kappa 7 defense forces repelled the remaining compact fleet, Marcus said. He pulled up the report on his tablet. Danny's warning got there 4 hours before the compact. The station was fully defended. 3 Earth patrol ships responded in time for the engagement. He paused. The compact fleet broke off. 7 more vessels destroyed or captured. The remaining 6 jumped out of the system. Elena nodded. The numbers settled in her head. And the mole? She asked. Marcus hesitated. That's less clear. The intelligence report went to the Confederation Security Council. They acknowledged receiving it. No further details on the investigation. He paused. There is one thing though. The Vathyrai ambassador, Ambassador Karath, issued a personal statement 3 hours ago saying that the Confederation Security Council had opened an inquiry into the source of the compact's intelligence regarding the Lihari diplomatic convoy. A longer pause. That's the first time any senior Confederation official has publicly acknowledged that there might be a mole. Elena felt something release slightly in her chest. It wasn't resolution. The inquiry into her own actions was real, the political consequences were real, and she wasn't naive enough to think that being right meant you got to avoid the consequences of being right. But something had moved. The information had reached the right people. The Lihari people aboard this station were safe and being treated. The compact fleet had been stopped. You could do the right thing and still face the fire afterward. She had always known that. But the right thing was done. Okay, she said. We have 48 hours. I want to use them well. She looked at Marcus. Set up a meeting with Captain Sarah for this afternoon. I want to start building the formal record of everything that happened in that nebula. Every detail. I want it documented, sourced, and ready for the inquiry before the Confederation vessel arrives. Yes, Commander. And Marcus. She looked at him steadily. Tell the crew. All of them. Tell them what the message says and tell them that what we did was right, and tell them that I'm going to make sure the inquiry record reflects exactly what happened and why. Every decision I made it as their commanding officer and I'm going to be clear about that in the record. No one on this crew is going to carry consequences they don't deserve. Marcus held her gaze for a moment. Yes, Commander, he said quietly. Captain Sarah came to the meeting that afternoon with Davin, the young engineer, and one other person Elena had not yet met, a Lihari man named Counselor Veth, a senior member of the Council of Remaining, one of the political body's most experienced diplomats and the person who had been overseeing the diplomatic mission that the destroyed convoy was part of. He was older than Captain Sarah, considerably older, with the deep slate blue skin gone slightly lighter at the temples and the broad, flat ridge of his nose more pronounced with age. He moved carefully, with the stiffness of someone who had injuries they were not fully acknowledging, and he sat down across from Elena in Helios 4's conference room with the deliberate care of someone managing pain without complaint. Commander Marsh, Counselor Veth said. His voice through the translator was deeper and more formal than Captain Sarah's, the specific formality of a politician who had been using formal language so long it was just how he talked. I have been told you are facing significant consequences for your actions. I wanted to meet you before the inquiry, and to make it clear that the Council of Remaining will provide any testimony or documentation you require for your defense. I appreciate that, Elena said. Though I want to be clear, my defense is the truth of what happened. I don't think it needs embellishment. No, Counselor Veth agreed. It doesn't. He was quiet for a moment. Commander, how much do you know about the history of the Lihari quarantine? The official version, Elena said, and some of the unofficial one. The unofficial version is more accurate, Counselor Veth said. The quarantine was proposed by the Vreth Compact. A pause long enough to let that settle. Through intermediaries. Through 2 Confederation Council members who were not aware, or chose not to be aware, that their sources had been compromised. The compact needed the Lihari isolated. We share a border with the region of space they intend to move through. His hands, all 4 of them, lay still on the table. The pathogen story was real. The pathogen existed. The damage to the Vithiri colonies was real. But it was not spread by the Lihari. It was spread deliberately by compact agents, with biological samples stolen from our medical databases. And then it was used to justify removing us from any position where we could warn anyone about what was coming. Elena held very still. She thought about the 14 months of quarantine. The slow, quiet process of a civilization being isolated. The vote, 16-2. The two had been Earth and one other, a small, rarely discussed species called the Galani who had small numbers and large consciences. You're saying the quarantine was a compact operation, she said. Yes, Councillor Veth said. And the mole in the Confederation Council was placed by the compact. Yes. We believe at least 2 council members. Possibly more. He met her eyes. Commander Marsh. What happened in the Keth Nebula was not a random attack. It was the beginning of an invasion. The compact has been preparing for 20 years. The quarantine was meant to ensure that when they moved, the Confederation's intelligence picture was corrupted, and one of their most strategically located border species was too weakened to provide warning. He paused. You disrupted that. A single ship. One human dreadnought. Something in his voice shifted, very slightly, the formality thinning for just a moment to show something underneath. We had given up expecting help, Commander. The signal was sent by Captain Sarah against my advice, because I no longer believed anyone would answer. Elena looked at him across the table. HFY, she said quietly. From this moment, we're going to make sure everyone hears what you just told me. Councillor Veth was quiet for a moment. I hope you are right, he said. He looked tired. He looked like someone who had been hoping for a very long time and was not yet ready to fully believe that the hoping had worked. I hope, Commander, that you are right. The first 24 hours at Helios 4 passed in a controlled blur of medical procedures, documentation, meetings, and the specific exhaustion of managing a crisis at the stage when the acute emergency is over but the structural work is still enormous. Elena slept for 4 hours in a borrowed room on the station. She woke up at 0400 local time, showered, drank coffee, and sat at the desk in the small room with a blank screen in front of her for about 15 minutes before she started writing. She wrote her full account of the events in the Keth Nebula. Not the official report, that was Marcus's careful, precise work, already drafted and approved. This was the thing she needed to write for herself in her own words, without the structure of an official document. She wrote about the moment she saw the red dot on the tactical display. She wrote about the child who walked through the umbilical and asked if this was the human ship. She wrote about Captain Sarah's story of the navigator, and the way the single blinking light on the Vethkara's hull had hit her harder than all the damage. She wrote, I knew the orders. I knew the law. I also knew that there were 12 children on a dying ship and that we were the only ones who answered the signal. You can hold both of those things in your head simultaneously. The law and the children. And when you hold them together, you find out which one is heavier. She stared at that sentence for a while. Then she kept writing. At 0700 she received a message from Danny Ortega. He had delivered the message package to Kappa 7 and then, instead of returning to the Resolute, had been asked to remain at the station to provide a first-person account of the events to the station commander. His message was brief and cheerful, which was his default mode for everything. Made it, Commander. Kappa 7 is buzzing. There's a lot of very important people asking very important questions about what exactly happened in that nebula, and I told them I was just the delivery guy, but I don't think they believed me. Also, I want you to know that your plan worked and also that it was absolutely the craziest thing anyone has ever asked me to do, and I would do it again immediately. Take care of yourself. Ortega out. Elena read the message twice. Then she sent back, Good work, Danny. Get some sleep. I'll see you on the other side of whatever comes next. The call from Admiral Conroy came at 1000. She had expected it. She had prepared for it. She had not expected the specific quality of what she heard when she picked up the call. James Conroy was 61 years old. He had been in the Earth Defense Force for 40 years. He had the face of a man who had made hard decisions for a long time, not damaged by them exactly but shaped by them the way a rock face is shaped by water. Not weaker but more specific. Elena had served under him for 3 years and respected him more than almost anyone in uniform. He looked at her for a moment after the connection established and he said, You got the message I sent. Yes, sir, Elena said. Before you responded to the signal. Yes, sir. A long pause. Elena, he said. And that was different. Not Commander Marsh. Elena. Sir, she said. I'm going to tell you something that is not going to be in any official communication, and I'm going to tell it to you because you deserve to hear it before the inquiry happens. He was quiet for a moment. When your report came through, your full report with the counselor's testimony about the quarantine being a compact operation, I took it straight to the Security Council. I also took it to the 3 Confederation members whose intelligence services have been independently investigating the compact for the past 6 months. There are people on the council who are not compromised who have been very carefully waiting for enough evidence to act. He paused. Your report gave them enough. Within 12 hours of receiving it, 2 council members were placed under formal security review. The quarantine resolution has been suspended pending investigation. As of this morning, the Lihari are no longer legally quarantined. Elena sat very still. The Lihari are free, she said. The quarantine is suspended, Conroy said carefully. That's not the same as officially resolved. But it means the 330 people on Helios 4 are no longer in a legally ambiguous situation. They are, as of this morning, protected persons under standard Confederation emergency protocols. Pause. It also means that the justification for the inquiry into your actions has significantly shifted. The regulations you violated were enacted as part of the quarantine framework. If the quarantine itself is under review as potentially illegitimate, the violations become harder to enforce, Elena said. That is the current legal assessment, yes. Conroy looked at her steadily. I'm not telling you the inquiry is going away. It's not. What happened in that nebula needs to be fully documented and understood. But I am telling you that the political weight of it has changed considerably. He paused one more time. I gave you a direct order, Elena. You disobeyed it. Yes, sir, Elena said. She held his gaze. You were right to disobey it, he said. The words were precise and deliberate, each one placed carefully. I want that in the record. I will say that at the inquiry. A direct order given without full intelligence, without knowing what we now know about the quarantine's origin, is not an order that obligated you to leave children to die. He looked at her. I sent that transmission because I was following the political guidance I had. I was wrong to send it. That will also be in the record. Elena was quiet for a moment. Admiral, she said. The crew. My people. They made these decisions with me. They need to be protected. Working on it, he said. Marsh, you're going to come out of the inquiry with your career if not your record. What happens after that is up to you. A pause and then, very briefly, something that was almost a smile. You fought 22 ships with 1. We had a good plan, Elena said. You had a crazy plan that worked, he said. There's a difference. He straightened. Report ready for the inquiry commission. I'll see you in 3 days. The call ended. Elena sat with it for a while. Then she went to find Captain Sarah and tell her what had changed. She found the Lihari captain in the medical bay. Not as a patient. Captain Sarah was standing beside a medical bed where an older Lihari woman was being treated, one of the civilians who had been in the critical group. She was holding the woman's hand, 2 of her lower hands wrapped gently around the older woman's hand, her upper arms at her sides. She was talking to the woman in the Lihari language, quietly, and the woman's breathing, which had been shallow and strained when Elena had last checked the patient roster, was slower and steadier now. Elena waited in the doorway. Captain Sarah looked up after a few minutes, saw Elena, and said something to the woman, apparently a reassurance, then came across the bay. Her name is Mira, Captain Sarah said. She was the schoolteacher on the colony transport. She managed to reach the Vethkara with her class. She paused. She taught all 12 of the children who came through your umbilical. She has been blaming herself for not doing more. I have been telling her that she got every single child under her care onto the ship. That every one of them is alive. She met Elena's eyes. I have been telling her what you said to me. That we made it. That's what matters. Elena felt the weight of it and held it. Captain, she said. The quarantine has been suspended. Captain Sarah was very still for a moment. Suspended, she repeated. Pending full investigation of its legitimacy. The evidence you gave me, the evidence Counselor Veth gave me, has been taken to the Security Council. 2 council members are under security review. She paused. Your people on this station are protected persons as of this morning? The stillness continued for a few seconds more. Then something happened to Captain Sarah's face that Elena had not seen before. The control, the extraordinary, precise control that Sarah maintained like a second skin, didn't break. It didn't fall away. But it shifted. Something behind it moved, like the first movement beneath ice in spring, subtle and enormous at the same time. 23 years, Captain Sarah said. Her voice was the same, translator rendered, precise, accented in that formal way. But quieter. Much quieter. I have been a diplomat for 23 years. I have spent the last 14 months trying to find a way to help my people. Writing appeals that were not answered. Sending communications that were blocked. Watching the quarantine tighten. She was quiet for a moment. I sent that signal because I had nothing left. Because I had exhausted everything else and there were 12 children on my ship and I thought, if I am wrong about anyone hearing then I am wrong and we die here. But if I am right. You were right, Elena said. Captain Sarah closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. When she opened them, the amber was very bright. Caro, she said softly. We go on. Caro, Elena agreed. The next morning, a ship arrived at Helios 4 that Elena had not expected. It was not the Confederation vessel coming to take custody of the Resolute. It was not an Earth Defense Force ship. It was a small, fast diplomatic courier, civilian registration, Galani flag, and it docked at the station's secondary berth with a quiet efficiency that suggested the people aboard had been in a hurry to get here. Elena was in the station's main conference room, working through documentation with Marcus and Counselor Veth, when Priya appeared in the doorway. You have visitors, Priya said, with the tone of someone who has decided to be neutral about something that they're not entirely neutral about. The visitors were 3. The first was a Galani woman named Ambassador Lean, the same species that had been the second vote against the quarantine 18 months ago. She was tall and thin, with skin that was a very pale gold and large compound eyes that took in the whole room at once. She moved with a careful, deliberate grace and she had the look of someone who had been traveling too long and sleeping too little. The second was a human man Elena recognized immediately, Senior Investigator Holt from the Confederation's Office of Internal Affairs. He was a gray-haired, sharp-eyed man in his 50s who was known in Confederation circles for investigations that were thorough to the point of being almost artistic. He had been involved in 3 major Confederation corruption cases in the past decade, and his presence here specifically now told Elena something significant. The third person was someone she didn't recognize. He was human or appeared to be. Middle-aged, unremarkable in height, with a nondescript appearance of someone who either didn't want to be recognized or had spent a career making themselves hard to describe afterward. He wore a plain uniform with no insignia that Elena could identify, and he sat down at the conference table without being invited and opened a small case that contained what appeared to be a very advanced recording device. Commander Marsh, Senior Investigator Holt said. My name is Holt. I've been sent by the Confederation Security Council's Emergency Oversight Committee to begin the formal record of events surrounding the Vreth Compact incursion into Confederation space. He looked at her steadily. I want to be clear, this is not the inquiry into your actions. That is a separate process. This is an investigation into the Compact, the compromised Council members, and the construction and maintenance of the Laihuri quarantine. You are here as a witness, not a subject. Elena absorbed this. And him? She said with a nod toward the unremarkable man. My colleague handles technical intelligence aspects, Holt said in a tone that didn't invite further questions about the colleague. Commander, I need to ask you to walk me through everything you observed in precise sequence, from the moment you first detected the distress signal. Elena looked at the recording device. Let me get Captain Sarah and Counselor Veth, she said. You're going to want to hear everything in the right order. The session lasted 7 hours. Elena had given official testimony before. She had been in debriefings and inquiries and formal reviews. She had learned a long time ago how to give testimony that was complete, accurate, and presented in a way that was navigable for whoever was receiving it, organized, clearly attributed, properly caveat where uncertainty existed. But she had never given testimony that felt quite like this. What Captain Sarah told Investigator Holt about the Compact's initial approach to the Council of Remaining, the offer, the price, the exact words used, was material that changed the shape of what Holt was investigating in real time. Elena could watch it happening, the careful, measured focus of the investigator sharpening as each new piece of information arrived, the pieces clicking into a pattern that was clearly larger and older than anyone in the room had fully understood before this morning. The unremarkable man took notes constantly. He never spoke. His presence was beginning to feel less ambiguous and more specifically alarming. At one point, during a break in the session, Ambassador Lean sat down next to Elena in the corridor outside the conference room and said, without preamble, "My government was the other vote." "I know," Elena said. "We were against the quarantine because we believed it was wrong," the ambassador said. "Not because we had specific intelligence about the Compact's involvement at the time. We simply believed it was wrong." She paused. I have been trying to reopen the quarantine issue through official channels for 14 months. I have been blocked at every procedural step. She looked at Elena with her compound eyes, which up close were extraordinary, each facet reflecting a slightly different angle of the room. You did in 14 hours what I could not do in 14 months. I had a dreadnought, Elena said. Ambassador Lean made a sound that might have been laughter. Yes, she said. That helped. She was quiet for a moment. Commander, after the inquiry. When this is resolved, not fully, it will not be fully resolved quickly, these things never are. But when the immediate situation has stabilized, the Lahiri will need advocates. Formal, recognized advocates who can speak in their voice in the chambers they still cannot enter themselves. She looked at Elena. The Galani cannot do this alone. Earth would be a powerful partner. That's above my pay grade, Elena said honestly. Not for much longer, I think, Ambassador Lean said. There was something amused in the way the compound eyes caught the light. You are the human who walked one ship into a fleet of 22, Commander. In my experience, that does not remain below pay grade for long. Elena looked at the corridor ceiling. That's either a promotion or a court-martial, she said. I haven't found out which yet. Why not both? Ambassador Lean said. The investigation session resumed after the break and continued until late evening. When they were finally done, Investigator Holt sat back in his chair and regarded the room. Elena, Captain Sarah, Counselor Veth, Marcus, Ambassador Lean, with an expression that was not exactly readable but had the quality of someone who had just placed the last piece of a very large puzzle. I am going to tell you something that is not yet public information, he said. The two council members under review are Vathirai Subminister Theron and the human representative from Kepler Station, one Delegate Rains. He paused. Both have been communicating with compact agents for approximately 3 years. The construction of the quarantine resolution was partly their work. They are now in the custody of the Security Council's Enforcement Division. The room was quiet. The compact needed the Lahiri isolated, Holt continued. They also needed to ensure that certain patrol routes in the border sectors were flexible, that there were predictable gaps in Confederation defense coverage when they moved. He looked at his notes. They have been planning this incursion for a long time. What they did not plan for, he stopped. Was us, Elena said. Was one human dreadnought and a pilot who flew through a 22-ship formation, Holt agreed. He looked at Elena with something that, in a very contained, investigator-appropriate way, might have been admiration. The compact's timetable has been disrupted. The fleet that attacked Kappa 7 is regrouping, but they have lost 13 ships and, more significantly, their timetable advantage. The Confederation has now been warned in detail about what they're facing. He paused. We are not safe. This is not over. The compact will adapt and they will try again. But we are no longer walking blind into it, and we are no longer walking into it with a compromised council and an isolated, weakened border species. He closed his notes. The record of this investigation will show that the events initiated by Commander Marsh in the Keth Nebula constituted a significant intelligence gathering and strategic intervention that is likely to have materially altered the course of the compact's planned incursion. He looked at Elena steadily. Whatever the inquiry into your conduct finds, Commander, this investigation's record is clear. Elena sat with that. Thank you, she said. 3 days passed. In those 3 days, Elena lived in a very specific kind of in-between. The crisis was over but the resolution was not yet settled, and the space between those two states had a particular texture. She had learned that texture over the course of her career. It felt like the period after a storm when the sky is still dark and the wind still moves but the rain has stopped, and you're not sure yet whether it's really over. She spent the time usefully. She worked with Priya and Dr. Cole and Dr. Thessan on the medical protocols that were emerging from their treatment of the Lahiri patients. She spent time in the cargo bay that Davin had converted into an informal classroom, where the Lahiri children, and increasingly several crew members from the Resolute, were attending something that had begun as a distraction and was gradually becoming an actual school. One of the adult Lahiri civilians, a woman named Byra who had been a teacher on the colony transport, was running it. She had organized the sessions by age and subject with the efficient energy of someone who had found the thing that made sense of the chaos, and she welcomed the human crew members as fellow learners rather than as helpers, which was exactly right. Elena sat in on one of the sessions. They were learning the Lahiri system of star navigation, the one Captain Sarah's old story was about. It was not, Elena discovered, merely a historical curiosity. It was still taught. Still used in modified form, as a backup navigation system on long-haul Lahiri ships. The principle was elegant. The stars did not move, not perceptibly, not on a human or Lihari lifespan timescale, and if you knew them well enough, their positions, their names, their relationships to each other, you could always find your way. She sat at the back of the session and listened to Byra explain the navigation system, watched the human crew members and Lihari children and adult civilians all leaning toward the same subject matter with the same focused interest, and felt the in-between texture of the day's shift just slightly toward something more like resolution. Captain Sarah found her on the station observation deck that evening. It was the best feature of Helios 4, a large, transparent dome at the top of the station's hub structure, offering a full panoramic view of space. The gas giant they orbited filled 1/4 of the sky, banded in deep amber and cream. Stars spread across the rest of it in the clarity that only deep space could offer, no atmosphere to blur or soften them. Elena was sitting alone with a cup of coffee, not quite thinking, when she heard the soft footfall that meant someone much taller than most humans had entered the deck. Captain Sarah sat down nearby, cross-legged on the deck, which brought her closer to eye level, and looked at the stars for a while without speaking. "When I was training as a diplomat," she said eventually, "my instructor told me that the most important thing I would ever learn was how to wait. How to sit with something unresolved and not try to force it into resolution before it was ready." "That's a hard thing to learn," Elena said. "It is. I was not good at it initially. Pause. I am better now. 14 months of quarantine is very instructive." Elena looked at the stars. "Are your people," she started and then stopped. "Are my people what? Are they okay?" Elena asked. "The ones on Varesh Prime. Under the quarantine. Do you know?" The silence that followed was longer than the previous ones. "Varesh Prime is under communication restrictions," Captain Sarah said. "We receive irregular and limited messages. The last one I received 4 weeks ago indicated that the population was stable." Pause. "That is not the same as okay. But stable. Alive." She was quiet. "There are approximately 4 million Lihari on Varesh Prime. There are 330 on this station. There are perhaps another 1,000 scattered across various places that are not Varesh Prime, diplomatic missions that were caught outside the quarantine zone when the resolution passed, individuals who were already traveling." She paused. "We are a small people, Commander. We have always been a small people. The Confederation considers us a minor species in terms of numbers and influence. Which is, I think, why they believed the quarantine was an acceptable solution." "It wasn't," Elena said. "No," Captain Sarah agreed. "It was not." They sat with that for a while. The gas giant's bands moved very slowly, large-scale atmospheric currents visible even at this distance. "The Council of Remaining is going to petition for formal reinstatement of Lihari Confederation membership," Captain Sarah said. "Once the quarantine is formally lifted and the mole investigation is complete. It will be a long process." She paused. "Counselor Veth asked me to lead the diplomatic mission. Will you?" Elena asked. A long pause. "I was a courier captain. A transport mission. I was chosen for this assignment because I was available and qualified, not because I have particular skills in high-level diplomacy." Another pause. "Though Counselor Veth says that anyone who can keep a ship together with emergency sealant and desperate engineering for 11 hours and still think clearly enough to send a distress signal on the right frequency in the right format to reach the right ship, that person has skills he values." "He's right," Elena said. "He is often right," Captain Sarah agreed. "It is occasionally annoying." A brief pause that contained the Lihari equivalent of a smile. "I have told him I will consider it. After the immediate situation is resolved." "That's a good answer." "I thought so." Captain Sarah looked up at the stars. "Mira taught me that navigator story actually. The schoolteacher. She was my teacher when I was young." A quiet pause. "She is recovering. Dr. Cole says she will be well enough to travel within the week." "That's good," Elena said. "Yes." Captain Sarah's amber eyes reflected the gas giant's bands of light. "Commander Marsh. What will happen to you? After the inquiry?" Elena considered the question honestly. "I don't know exactly," she said. "My record is going to show violations regardless of the context. That limits certain career paths. The investigation report helps. It changes how the violations are characterized. But it doesn't erase them." She was quiet for a moment. "I think I'll be okay. The Admiral is in my corner, which matters. And right now, with the compact incursion becoming a major security issue, the Earth Defense Force needs every experienced commander it has." Pause. "What I did is going to be harder to punish when the outcome is that we have advanced warning of an invasion. You know, Captain Sarah said, in Lahiri legal tradition, there is a principle that has no direct translation but that is roughly equivalent to, the act that saves the community cannot be punished by the community. It has been invoked in our history at significant moments. She paused. I am not suggesting that this applies directly to your legal situation, but I find the principle relevant. The act that saves the community, Elena repeated. She held the words for a moment. I like that. I thought you might. The Confederation Inquiry Commission arrived on the morning of the fourth day. They came on a mid-sized diplomatic vessel, the CCS Concord, and they were 3 people. A senior Vathyri legal officer named Advocate Thessar, a human lawyer named Margaret Chin who worked for the Confederation Civilian Oversight Board, and a retired Earth Defense Force admiral named Howard King, who served as the senior military assessor. Elena met them at the docking collar with Marcus and Priya beside her. She was in full dress uniform for the first time in 4 days. She had spent 15 minutes that morning deciding whether to wear it, because there was an argument that wearing dress uniform to an inquiry that you were guilty in was a kind of theater, and she had always disliked theater. But Marcus had said very practically, Commander, you should look like what you are, and she had thought about that and decided he was right. She was an Earth Defense Force commander. She had made her decisions as one. She would face the inquiry as one. The commission members shook hands with appropriate formality. Margaret Chin looked at Elena with the kind of careful professional neutrality that was itself a kind of information. Admiral King looked at Elena with the specific look of a retired flag officer encountering an active one who has done something significant. Assessing, measuring, reaching conclusions that wouldn't be shared until the right moment. Commander Marsh, Advocate Thessar said. She was a tall Vathyri, a species that ran to elegant and attenuated, with narrow faces and voices that the translators rendered as precisely modulated and somewhat formal. We're ready to begin whenever you are. Now is fine, Elena said. Follow me. The inquiry lasted 2 days. Elena testified for 6 hours on the first day. She was thorough and precise and she did not soften anything. She described every decision she had made, the information she had when she made it, and the reasoning she had applied. She described receiving Admiral Conroy's order and choosing to disregard it. She described the engagement in the nebula and her tactical reasoning. She described everything she had learned from Captain Sarah and Counselor Veth. She did not apologize for any of it. When they asked her, toward the end of the first day, if she understood that her actions had placed her crew in significant danger, she said yes. When they asked if she understood that the crew had not all been given a full choice about the risk they were undertaking, she said yes, and that this was the part of command authority that was most important to handle correctly, and that she had made the decision and accepted the weight of making it rather than putting it to a vote among the crew, because some decisions in command were made alone and then carried alone. When they asked if she would make the same decisions again, she said yes. When they asked why, she said, because there were 12 children on a dying ship, and we were the only ones who answered. Nobody had a follow-up question to that. The second day was Captain Sarah's testimony, and Counselor Veth's and Marcus's and Sophia's and Dr. Cole's. Each of them was asked to speak to what they had observed, what they had decided, and why. Each of them was honest. Each of them said in their own way that they had chosen to be there. Danny Ortega testified by transmission from Kappa 7. He was in his characteristic cheerful mode for most of it, which made the commission look at him with slight consternation, but when they asked him the same question, if he would do it again, he reached into his breast pocket, took out the small paper crane and held it up. My grandmother made this, he said. When I was 5. She said it was so I'd always have something to fly. He put it back. Yeah, I'd do it again. Obviously. On the evening of the second day, the commission retired to deliberate. Elena had been advised that deliberations typically took between 12 and 48 hours. She settled in for the wait with the equanimity of someone who has already made their peace with the possible outcomes. What she did not expect was that the commission would return in 3 hours. She was eating dinner with Marcus and Sophia in the station's dining area when Priya came to find them, and the look on Priya's face was neutral in a way that could have meant anything. They want to see you, Priya said. Elena put down her fork and went. The commission sat across the table from Elena in the main conference room, and Admiral King spoke first. We have reviewed the full record, he said. The testimony of Commander Marsh, her officers, and the Lahiri witnesses. The investigation reports from Senior Investigator Holt's commission. The military assessment of the engagement in the Keth Nebula. The intelligence documentation regarding the Vreth Compact's operations and the compromised council members. He paused. The record is comprehensive. Yes, sir, Elena said. The commission's findings are as follows, he said. He produced a tablet and read directly from it, which told Elena that the language had been carefully chosen and they were going to stick to it. Commander Marsh violated direct orders and Confederation treaty protocols. These violations are documented and confirmed. The Commission does not find grounds to recommend dismissal from service, court-martial, or criminal sanction. He paused. The violations occurred in the context of a distress signal from a group of civilians and children whose legal status, the Lihari quarantine, has since been identified as itself a product of deliberate manipulation by a hostile foreign power. The violations also produced significant strategic intelligence that materially advanced the Confederation's security posture against the compact incursion. Another pause. In short, Commander Marsh broke the law. The law she broke was being used as a weapon against the people she protected by breaking it. And the act of breaking it may have prevented a strategic intelligence failure of significant scale. Elena waited. The Commission is recommending a formal note of violation in Commander Marsh's service record, Admiral King continued. This note will be accompanied by the full contextual record and the investigation's findings, which will be available to any reviewing authority. He looked up from the tablet. The Commission is also recommending that Commander Marsh be commended for initiative, strategic judgment, and effective command under conditions of significant uncertainty. Both the note and the commendation will exist simultaneously in the record. Elena looked at him. A simultaneous violation and commendation. Yes, Admiral King said. It is, the Commission acknowledges, an unusual outcome. The situation was unusual. Something moved in his face, not quite a smile but close. The Earth Defense Force has a long tradition of officers who do the right thing in the wrong way, and the Commission finds it appropriate to fully document both aspects of that tradition. Elena was quiet for a moment. Thank you, she said. After the Commission departed, Elena sat alone in the conference room for a few minutes. She thought about the 12 children who had come through the umbilical. About Mira, the schoolteacher, stabilizing under Dr. Cole's care. About Davin, working with his damaged hands in the dark of the Vethkara while Yuna talked him through the umbilical connection. About Danny Ortega flying the arrow through a gap between two warships with a paper crane in his pocket. About Captain Sarah, standing on the bridge of a dying ship, sending a distress signal that she no longer believed anyone would answer. She thought about the word, Carol. Let's go. Not a battle cry. Just a decision. She thought about the navigator who knew the stars. She stood up. The farewell, when it came, was quieter than she expected. Not a formal ceremony. Helios 4 wasn't that kind of place, and Elena wasn't that kind of person, and the situation had been too raw and specific for the kind of ceremony that required everyone to stand in lines. It was the morning of the 5th day. The Resolute was being cleared for departure. Several of the Lihari civilians who were healthy enough to travel were being arranged into a temporary housing solution at a neutral station 3 systems away. Not Varesh Prime, not yet, but a place where they could be comfortable while the formal reinstatement process worked its way through the Confederation bureaucracy. The medical cases who couldn't travel yet, including Mira, would remain at Helios 4 under Dr. Cole's care, with 2 of the Resolute's medical teams staying behind to assist for the next 2 weeks. Captain Sarah found Elena at the docking collar an hour before departure. The Council of Remaining has asked me to formally convey their gratitude, she said. It is expressed through Councillor Veth's official channels and will be part of the diplomatic record. Tell Councillor Veth I appreciate it, Elena said. I will. Pause. I am telling you something different. On my own behalf. Elena waited. I sent that signal because I had 12 children and a dying ship and nowhere to go, Captain Sarah said. And you answered it. And the reason you answered it, not because you were ordered to, not because it was strategically optimal, not because there was any political benefit to you, the reason you answered it was because that was who you are. She paused. I am a diplomat. I spend my career in the space between what should be done and what will actually be done. In 14 months of the quarantine, I had stopped believing those two things could align. Her amber eyes were steady. You aligned them. By yourself. With one ship. She paused. I wanted to say thank you in a way that is not diplomatic. In a way that is just true. Elena held the weight of it. You sent the signal, she said. That mattered. If you'd given up, if you hadn't believed even barely that someone might answer, she stopped. You kept the light on. Captain Sarah was quiet for a moment. The blinking light, she said. On the hull. I saw it from the view screen, Elena said. Before we even established communication. One light still on. She paused. Someone kept it on. That was you, wasn't it? It was Davin, Captain Sarah said. He said that if anyone came, they needed to be able to find us. Elena thought about 22-year-old Davin, working through 11 hours with damaged hands, keeping one light on. Tell him, she said, that it worked. 3 months passed. In those 3 months, the Vreth Compact made 2 more probing incursions into Confederation space. Smaller than the Keth Nebula operation, more targeted, clearly feeling for weaknesses now that the direct assault timeline had been disrupted. Both were met with significantly more prepared defenses than the Compact had encountered before. The Confederation Security Council had reconstituted itself without the compromised members, and the new configuration had a certain grimness of focus that the old one had lacked. The Lihari quarantine was officially lifted 6 weeks after the Helios 4 inquiry. The announcement was made quietly, buried in a much longer Security Council statement about the Compact investigation, but Elena read it 3 times when Marcus forwarded it to her. 6 weeks of bureaucratic process had felt very long and very short simultaneously, in the way that important things always did. 6 weeks to undo 14 months of a death sentence. 6 weeks to officially say, we were wrong, and more than that, we were used. Varesh Prime was open to Confederation shipping and communication immediately after the announcement. The first ships in were medical convoys. Elena was not on them. She had returned to active duty with the Resolute 2 weeks after Helios 4, assigned to a patrol route in the outer sectors that was, she noted, specifically positioned near the area where the Compact was most likely to make its next approach. Someone in EDF command had decided that her particular combination of experience and judgment was best applied to the problem they were most concerned about. She had mixed feelings about this. It was both a compliment and a way of making sure she was busy, and filed it under things I will think about more carefully when I have more time. Her crew stayed with her. Every single one of them. This was not surprising, but it mattered to her in a way she couldn't entirely articulate. Sophia's left index finger still tapped when she was thinking. Una still wore her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. Marcus still had the radio announcer voice, though it had acquired a certain quality in the past months that Elena would have called quiet pride if she were being precise about it. Danny Ortega returned to the Resolute after his debriefing at Kappa 7 and continued to fly the Arrow with cheerful insanity and a paper crane in his pocket. He had been formally recognized for the Kappa 7 mission by the station commander, which meant a commendation in his record and a dinner he described as too much food and a lot of handshaking. Davin, the engineer from the Vethkara, sent Elena a message 2 months after Helios 4. He was at a technical university on Confederation Station 7, studying advanced propulsion engineering on a scholarship that the Helios 4 administration had organized in the chaotic aftermath of the crisis. He said the university was good, the food was unfamiliar but improving, and he was learning propulsion concepts he had only been able to approximate on the Vethkara's emergency-powered systems. He signed off the message, Caro. I go forward. Elena wrote back, Caro. So do I. The message from Captain Sarah arrived on the 93rd day after Helios 4. It was long, longer than their previous communications, which had been efficient and specific, the communications of 2 busy people with specific things to convey. This one had a different quality. It was personal in a way that their professional relationship had not previously permitted, or perhaps more accurately that the specific urgency of the crisis had not left room for. Captain Sarah was writing from Varesh Prime. She had gone back to arrange the diplomatic mission that Counselor Veth had asked her to lead. She had gone back and found that the planet was the same skies, the same long grass plains in the northern regions that she described in a way that made Elena think of photographs she had never seen but could almost imagine, and different in ways that were subtle and permanent. 14 months of quarantine had not destroyed them, but it had changed them. There was a quality she described as the memory of being left, that lived in the people now, not as bitterness but as knowledge. A kind of knowledge that was both heavy and clear, like the navigator's knowledge of the stars. She wrote, we know now what we are. We know which things we carry that cannot be taken and which things were never as secure as we believed. We know who answered and who did not. And we are deciding what to do with that knowledge. She wrote about the children. All 12 of them were healthy. The 4 youngest had no clear memory of the Vethkara. The older ones did, but they held it differently, not as trauma, though it was that too, but as a story. Something that had happened and been survived and was now part of who they were. Mira had returned to Varesh Prime 2 months after Helios 4. She was teaching again. Captain Sarah wrote, she is teaching the navigator story. She teaches it now to all of them, not just to the young ones but to everyone who will sit and listen. She says she taught it before because it was a good story. She teaches it now because she knows it is true. At the end of the message, Captain Sarah wrote, "I am going to Confederation Central Station next week to begin the diplomatic mission. I am afraid of it in the way that you are afraid of a thing when you understand exactly what it requires. I wanted to write this to you before I went because I find I carry you with me, the image of you in that docking bay crouching down to talk to a child who was 4 years old and had just survived something terrible. I carry that. I wanted you to know." Elena read the message twice. Then she sat at the desk in her quarters aboard the Resolute, in the amber night cycle lighting, and wrote back. She wrote about the patrol route in the outer sectors and the feeling of flying over the same kind of space where the crisis had happened and finding it ordinary again, which was strange and good. She wrote about the crew and what they were like now, the specific, hard-to-describe quality that a group of people developed after going through something difficult together. She wrote about the inquiry note in her record sitting alongside the commendation, and how she had decided to think of it not as a contradiction but as an accurate description. She had broken the law and she had done the right thing, and both things were true and would always be true, and she was at peace with that. She wrote, "You sent the signal when you had stopped believing anyone would answer. I want you to understand what that means to me. It means you hadn't given up. Even when you thought you had, you hadn't. You kept one light on. And that is not a small thing. That is the whole thing." She wrote, "Go to Central Station. Lead the mission. You're the navigator who knows the stars. You know how to get home." She signed it, Caro, Commander Elena Marsh, U.S. Resolute. Then she went back to the bridge. 6 months after the events in the Keth Nebula, the Confederation Security Council passed Resolution 4471, formally condemning the construction and enforcement of the Lihari quarantine as having been achieved through deliberate manipulation by a hostile foreign power. It also passed Resolution 4472, formally reinstating the Lihari as full Confederation member species with all associated rights, responsibilities, and protections. The resolutions passed 20 votes to 0. Both votes were unanimous. Elena was on patrol in the outer sectors when the votes came through. Marcus read her the numbers and she sat with them in her chair on the bridge for a moment. 20 to 0. 18 months ago it had been 16 to 2. The difference between 16 to 2 and 20 to 0 was the distance between possible and accomplished, between an argument being made and an argument being won. It was not nothing. "Play it on the general channel," she said. "Commander?" Marcus looked up. "The vote. The announcement. Play it on the general channel throughout the ship." She looked around the bridge at her crew. Everyone should hear it. Marcus played it. They heard the Confederation Secretary General read the resolutions. Resolution 4471 first, with its precise and damning language about the quarantine, and then Resolution 4472, with its formal and complete language of reinstatement. The Secretary General's voice was carefully controlled in the way of someone delivering something significant and understanding that they are delivering it. When it finished, the bridge was quiet. Then someone started clapping. Elena didn't see who started it. It spread too fast, around the bridge and then through the open channel to the rest of the ship, and for about 30 seconds the Resolute was full of the sound of human beings responding to the knowledge that something had been made right. Elena did not clap. She sat very still in her chair and felt something that didn't have a clean name in any language she knew but was close to what you feel when a very heavy thing is finally put down. Not celebration, not relief exactly, but the profound physical sensation of something no longer being carried. She thought about Varesh Prime and the 4 million people on it who could now communicate with the rest of the galaxy without restriction. She thought about Mira teaching children to navigate by stars. She thought about the blinking light on the Vethkara's hull, the one white light in the violet dark of the Keth Nebula, the one that Davin had kept on so that if anyone came, they would be able to find them. The day after the vote, a transmission arrived from Captain Sarah. It was short. "Commander Marsh. The vote was unanimous. I did not believe it would be unanimous. I stood in the observation gallery of the council chamber and watched them raise their hands and I counted. I counted twice. 20. 20 to 0. I have been a diplomat for 23 years. I have believed, mostly, that patience and precision and the careful application of reason could achieve things over time. What happened in the past 6 months has not changed that belief exactly. But it has added something to it. It has added you. The council passed the resolutions because of the full record, the investigation, the intelligence, the testimony. But the record existed because one ship answered a signal. Because one commander looked at the law and the children and weighed them and chose. Because 12 children and 300 other living people arrived at Helios 4 alive and able to give testimony, and because a 22-year-old engineer kept one light on for 11 hours so that someone could find them. I am told that in human culture there is a phrase, the right person at the right time. I have been thinking about this phrase for 6 months. I believe it is approximately correct, but I think it misses something. The right person at the right time suggests fate or luck or the happy coincidence of circumstances. What I observed was not a coincidence. It was a decision. A person who chose to be the right person. That is different. That is harder. And I think it is more important. Caro, Commander. Go forward. I will tell this story for the rest of my life. Captain Sarah of the Lihari Council of Remaining. Elena read the message 3 times. Then she got up, walked to the ship's observation window, a long portside gallery that ran the length of the crew deck, 3 meters of transparent composite looking out at unfiltered space, and she looked out at the stars. They were the same stars. They were always the same stars. The ones that the navigator had used to find her way home, and the ones that Mira was teaching children to read, and the ones that burned in that specific clear way that only deep space showed you. No atmosphere, no cloud, no interference, just light crossing distance in the old, simple, reliable way it always had. She had stood in this gallery before. Many times. She had always found it grounding, the reminder of scale, of how old everything was, of how small and how significant human beings were simultaneously. She stood there now and thought about the past 6 months and about the Caro of it, the forward motion, the decision made and acted on, the weight carried and accepted and moved through. She thought about what Captain Sarah had said, not the right person at the right time, but a person who chose to be the right person. She held that thought carefully because it was important and she didn't want to misuse it or inflate it into something it wasn't. She had not been brave in any extraordinary sense. She had not been heroic in the way that stories told heroism. She had looked at a situation and made the only decision she could live with. That was all. That was the whole of it. But that was also, she thought, enough. Later that evening, Elena returned to the bridge for the night watch. The amber night cycle lighting turned everything warm and human. The stars beyond the view screen moved very slowly with the ship's long patrol arc, the same stars reorganizing themselves into slightly different configurations as the Resolute turned. Sophia was on duty. Her finger tapped on her knee. Marcus was at communications, managing the steady flow of routine traffic. Una was in engineering, doing something to the secondary power grid that she had been meaning to do for weeks and had finally found time for. Danny Ortega was in the shuttle bay, running maintenance on the Arrow, probably with the paper crane sitting on the console where he could see it. The Resolute moved through space and the crew did their work and the stars continued to be the stars, fixed and navigable and old, sending their light across the dark toward whatever was in the path of it, the way they always had. Elena sat in her chair. She thought about the signal. The red dot on the tactical display. The moment of decision. She thought about the child who had stepped through the umbilical and asked if this was the human ship. She thought about Captain Sarah's amber eyes, that extraordinary steadiness, in a person running on emergency power in a dying ship. She thought about 20-0. She thought, we answered. And then she thought, that's what you do. When the signal comes. When the light is still on in the dark. You answer. She settled in her chair and looked at the stars and felt at peace. Not 6 months later the second signal came. It was different this time. Not a single Lihari distress call from a broken ship, but a coordinated broadcast from 11 species simultaneously, each transmitting from different sectors of Confederation space, each using the same emergency Class 7 protocol, all of them broadcasting on the same channel. And the message was the same in all 11 languages, all 11 translated simultaneously through Elena's implant into the same 11 words. We have heard what humans do. We are asking for help. Elena read the signal on the tactical display for approximately 3 seconds. Then she looked at Marcus. Record our response, she said. Yes, Commander. She thought about Captain Sarah saying her name in the observation gallery. She thought about Davin's one blinking light. She thought about Caro, not a battle cry, just a decision, just the moment when you choose to go and you go. Broadcast on all channels, she said. EDF frequency and Confederation civilian channels simultaneously. I want everyone to hear this. Ready, Commander? Elena leaned forward slightly in her chair. This is Commander Elena Marsh, U.S. Resolute, Earth Defense Force. We received your signal. She paused for one moment. We are on our way. She looked at Marcus and nodded. Marcus sent the broadcast. The Resolute adjusted course and the stars shifted in the view screen, and Elena felt the now familiar sensation of a decision settling, complete, weighty, and clean. All stations, she said, her voice carrying across the bridge with its night cycle warmth and its quiet crew doing their work. Combat readiness. Non-essential lighting to minimal. Prepare for extended operation. 47 people on the bridge moved with the coordinated precision of people who had done this before and would do it again and understood completely why they were doing it. Drive at maximum, Elena said. Maximum, Una confirmed from engineering. Caro. We go. The Resolute went. Somewhere behind them, in a briefing room on a Confederation station that mattered, a replay was being watched. 11 species receiving the reply. 11 sets of very different eyes watching the same screen. 11 translators rendering the same words. We received your signal. We are on our way. And in 11 different languages, in 11 different ways, in voices that carried the particular quality of people who have been carrying something heavy for a long time and have just had the first reason in a long time to put it down, in all 11 of them, in different words but the same meaning, the response was the same. They answered. In a classroom on Varesh Prime, Mira was teaching the Navigator story. She told it as she always told it now, carefully with all the details, the stars by name, the 4 years of traveling, the long journey home. She told the part where the Navigator was afraid and the part where she was not afraid and the part where she found the first star she recognized and held onto it like something solid in the formless dark. She told the part where she arrived home and her family had given her up for dead and the reunion that was not dramatic or photogenic but was simply real, two people who loved each other holding on. And then she told the part she had added to the story herself 6 months ago, the part that was true even though it had not been in the original story, the part that was always true even when it wasn't explicitly said. The Navigator came home, Mira said. And she spent the rest of her life teaching others. Not just how to navigate, how to keep the light on. Because the light is not for you, you know where you are. The light is for the person coming from far away in the dark, who needs to know there is something worth finding. She looked at the children watching her. Keep the light on, she said. Someone will come. Indeed.